So, is it over? Did the Iraq war quietly start to end today? Maybe. Iraq's three-member presidential council has approved the U.S.-Iraq Status of Forces Agreement as of today. It's sort of the last real procedural hurdle for this agreement to go into effect, though there will be a referendum on it next year that will allow the Iraqi people to call for changes in it or possibly to rescind it at that time. But barring something dramatic happening in that referendum, we now know what the end looks like in Iraq after these 5.5 long years. By next summer, all U.S. troops have to be out of Iraqi cities and towns. So then where will they be? Then by the end of 2011, 3 years from now, all U.S. troops, everyone really, everyone, no residual forces or trainers or whatever, all have to be gone completely out of the country. And in the meantime, all contractors are subject to Iraqi law for the first time. We have more contractors than troops in Iraq now. We have for a long time. No one exactly knows how those companies are going to handle their newfound legal jeopardy. It's possible they will all just decide to leave in short order. And if that doesn't sound endy enough for you, well, check out how the still president, the almost president, and their Iraqi counterpart talked about it today. President Bush and President-elect Obama both called the Iraqi prime minister today to congratulate him. And the Obama team then issued a statement saying that he is, quote, committed to a responsible redeployment of American troops from Iraq and to respecting Iraq's sovereignty, and that he looks forward to visiting Iraq as president. The approval of the agreement came on a day of widespread violence in Iraq this week. Bombings in northern and eastern and western Iraq today claimed at least 22 lives, including 2 American troops in Mosul. But what does violence in Iraq mean for our American troops there now? I mean, other than risk to them as targets and risk to them as bystanders. What is the military mission for Americans in Iraq right now? Why are we going to keep our folks there under another 3 years under these admittedly somewhat confusing terms? Well, joining us now to maybe, but probably not even try to talk me down, is NBC's chief foreign correspondent, Richard Engel. Richard, thanks very much for being here.
It's my pleasure. So I'm supposed to try and talk you down about the SOFA tonight, the Status of Forces Agreement.
Well, sort of, but nobody ever does, so if you don't feel like trying, you don't have to.
The war is not over, but there is a new mission in Iraq, and the mission now primarily is to prevent the regime from collapsing and to try and train the Iraqi security forces. Those are the 2 primary goals. As you said, by the end of June, by next spring, summer, all U.S. troops are supposed to be back on their bases, out of civilian centers, where they will sit unless there is a specific incident that they have to respond to, and that response would be coordinated through a joint U.S. and Iraqi council. It is a very different mission now. Now U.S. troops, while they operate with Iraqi forces, set the pace for the war. When they need to go out on a raid, they do it. When they need to secure a home or take over a position, they do it. In the future, it will be a training mission, and they will go out as a rapid reaction force when needed, when the Iraqis feel they need to.
Richard, when you say that it is the job of U.S. troops to support the Iraqi regime right now, does that mean specifically supporting Nouri al-Maliki? Does that mean just preventing an anti-democratic coup? Does that mean helping with day-to-day policing tasks? What does that mean? It
means to prevent a regime collapse. If you have some U.S. troops still in the country, it will certainly be will stop Iran from invading, although nobody expects that would happen, or prevent Syria from invading, although no one expects that. It could prevent a coup. If there were a coup, then the U.S. would clearly try and intervene and prevent that from happening. So a descent into regional chaos. So that is their, I guess you could say, their primary mission. This country has almost gone to war, and the U.S. repeatedly with itself, and the U.S. has tried to prevent that from happening in the past. I'll give you a very good example. If you remember the Basra offensive, it was a big deal. It was the first time that Maliki really turned on the Shiite militias. He sent a lot of his forces to the south, where Basra is, and asked the Kurds, who are in the north, to backfill some of his forces in a town called Hanakin. It's on the Iranian border. The Kurds believe that this is their territory, and after the Basra mission was over, Maliki found that the Kurdish forces weren't leaving, and he almost ordered tanks, his own tank divisions, to attack the Kurdish north. And the U.S. troops who were on the ground had to come in and say, don't do this, show him satellite photographs and say the Kurdish tanks and the Kurdish forces aren't exactly where you think they are, and prevented what could have been a collapse, an internal civil war from breaking out. So they will also be doing that kind of mission.
If the role of U.S. troops, I mean, we're talking about 146,000 Americans still stationed there right now. If their role does end up being intervening in Iraqi civil war, what side do we take?
We would take the side of the central government, and that is also somewhat problematic because we're there or U.S. forces are there to support this government, which is considered internationally to be one of the most corrupt regimes in the world. There's a group called Transparency International that ranked Iraq as the third most corrupt nation on the planet after Myanmar and Somalia. So they're there on a training mission and one to support the Iraqi central government, which is deeply problematic.
Richard Engel, thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. It's always great to have you here.
All right. Next time, maybe we'll be back from California.
Indeed. Looking forward to it.